Welcome to the Community of Excellence podcast, where lived experience leads the way. I'm your host Nil Suner, and together we'll be exploring powerful conversations at the heart of mental health, recovery, and peer support.
Hope for a generation, just beyond my reach, not beyond my sight. Hope for a generation.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Community of Excellence podcast. I'm Nil Suner, and today I have Claire Groves with me. Hi, Claire. How are you? Can you introduce yourself to our audience?
Hi, Neil. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. My name's Claire Groves. I am peer coordinator for the North London Foundation Trust based in one of their crisis prevention houses.
Thank you. So, as usual, now we start with a brief history, brief journey of how you came to live the experience work.
Okay, so I guess it's important for me to go back to when I first started with my mental kind of ill health, if you like. And that started way back when I was a child. But I never sought help, or I was never offered any kind of support. So as a teenager, I learned ways to cope myself, which weren't necessarily very helpful ways. And one of those ways, I think, was using drugs and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I came into services in London and starting my kind of journey as peer support or lived experience was I'd had a breakdown whilst living in Spain and came back to London. It was just the right thing to do. I live in the London borough of Haringey. So I went to my local at the time. They still had what they call a walk-in crisis centre, which has since shut down. And I went in there and sought help. And so then I started my journey of mental health recovery and understanding what was going on. I don't know if it's important for to know a diagnosis or what it is, but for me, it was obsessive compulsive disorder with stress-induced psychotic depression.
Okay.
So I started having kind of therapy and medication, and things started to improve. And I'd probably been under the care of the complex care team for about 2 years. And my aim had always been to get back into work. So throughout my life, from when I was 12 years old, I've always worked. I've always had some sort of job. I've always earned money. It's always been very important to me. I hadn't worked, I think, for 2 or 3 years by that point. And I was having a discussion with my care coordinator, and she said, look, there's an organisation in Haringey that works with people that are interested in doing voluntary work. So I signed up to them, and through them, Havco they were called, through them they directed me to another organisation which no longer exists. And they were like for carers, mental health carers, and kind of mental health support, kind of peer support type thingy. And it was run by people that had lived experience. And one of the first things I got involved with them was doing a Stamp Out Stigma campaign. And the idea of that was trying to get in touch with local churches, mosques, and try and speak to the faith leaders about the difference between kind of, I suppose, mental health, I guess, hearing voices, hallucinations, and what would be talking in tongues, and what could be considered cultural and what was kind of medical. I think the plan was a really good plan. It was a really good kind of campaign, but we just didn't have the resources to follow it through kind of properly. I then got involved with doing some redesigning the leaflets at St Anne's Hospital. So we went in and we spoke with the patients to find out what they felt would be useful for when they first came in. So the welcome packs or the welcome leaflets. So that was really good. And then they told me, so at the time, North London, so it's now called North London Foundation Trust, but at the time I was working for one part of it, which was Barnet Enfield and Haringey Mental Health Trust, at the time it was called. And they said to me, they're doing like a open day, looking at employing some previous service users or service users that are still within the services for a new peer support role. Why didn't I go along? So it was up in Enfield in the Dugdale Centre. And I went along, and it was quite interesting. And they talked about kind of, I suppose, the trust and what how excited they were about the role, what it would involve. And I think thankfully for me, they still had paper application forms. So I took that away, I filled it out. And then when I went back for it, I was having kind of therapy session in one part of St Anne's, and the office where I needed to hand in, like HR office, was in another part of St Anne's. So I went in there and I handed it in, and I remember the person that I was meant to hand it into wasn't there. They were on annual leave or something. So I was really anxious, and I left. And then I went back the following week or 2 weeks later because I hadn't heard anything, because I was like, I've got to check that the right person got the form. What if they didn't get the form? What if they didn't get the form? Anyway, I went back, checked, they had got the form, and they just explained to me, this is NHS and it's a slow process and we will get round to it. So I was like, right, okay. So I got shortlisted. So the people that I'd been doing the voluntary work with, they're called Nuala and Penny. They said to me, if you want, we can do like a test interview. So I took them up on that. I'm not sure that it helped, because those sort of situations make me really, really nervous. So anyway, I went for the interview, dressed up, felt really uncomfortable in what I was wearing. Made that big mistake. I always say, go for an interview in something you feel comfortable in. And yeah, so I went along, I had this interview, and it was terrifying. There was like 4 people sat on the other side of the table asking all these different questions. And I was, I guess I was just my authentic self. I couldn't be anyone other than who I was. And obviously I came out of there and the self-doubt, I've done really rubbish. Oh, well, never mind. At least I tried. Then I got a call I think a few days later, or a couple of weeks later. I can't remember exactly how long it was. But they said, we'd like to offer you the job. So I was like, wee, conditional offer. And that was it, really. So then I went along and we had, they did all the checks, had to do like the DBS check and all that kind of stuff. They did all the checks and then contacted us, or well, me, with a start date. So we went to St Anne's and we had it was some corporate induction and stuff. We went along there and I met the other peers. So we were the first cohort for BEA, Barnet, Enfield and Haringey, Mental Health Trust. And there were 8 of us. So each borough had 2 whole-time equivalents. So in Enfield, I chose to work in Enfield because my care is in Haringey, and I live in Haringey, and I didn't want it too close to home. And the first year, they put us in what they call the triage, or the assessment teams. So there was me and someone else. We were two full-time people, and then Barnet and Haringey had 3 part-time. And that was how we started. The role was kind of given to us we were allowed to do what we wanted with it and form it ourselves. There was obviously a job description, and there were tasks that we were expected to do. But as it was a new role, our manager let us create it in the way that we saw fit. And most of that was getting out into the community, trying to get people before they went into the services. Sometimes when they're getting an assessment, they've been in services a long time anyway, or they know the services, but quite often we would get paired up with people that were just coming into the services for the first time. So we would try and head it off with tapping them into community stuff rather than them having to go into secondary mental health services, really.
Right. Thank you for that. So a couple of explanations, because part of our audience might not understand some of it. So whole-time equivalent in a job post means that you might have 2 full-time job posts, but you might divide it or share it across 4 people, half a day, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And what was the timeline? How long ago you started?
Right. Yeah. So that was May the 2016.
Wow, that was very specific.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But funny enough, can't give you the exact date, but I do remember it was mid-April
Right.
for me
Okay.
when I first started of 2018.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay.
So our listeners will notice that none of our journeys have been straightforward. And I think you might agree with me on this. We can't say it's straightforward now either.
No.
And to an untrained eye, it might even be a bit more difficult, because when the first cohorts were happening, all the resources and people are trying to get everybody in. because it's a new thing
Yeah.
and they need people. Whereas now, because there's a national rollout since at least 2019, uh, what do they call it? They call it in the private sector, markets are a little bit saturated.
Yes.
They call it now. And some trainings are accredited, some are not. There are different ways in. So I am getting, especially since I've become care and lived experience manager, I'm getting a lot of questions on how we can start, how we can learn about this work, how we can find out about what it's like. Would you recommend it? Where to apply? Where can I get training? Do you get a lot of questions on this, and what do you tell them?
I do. Yeah, I do get questions about it. I mean, for us, when we first started, we were told that we would be given peer support worker training. Yeah. And they hooked us up and we did this course and it was together with City and Guilds. So it was a City and Guilds diploma level 3 and it was in health and social care. So it wasn't peer support at all. And we kept asking for it and they're going, but we've got the training, we've given you the training. And it was like, yeah, we've got this training. It's actually a diploma in health and social care, which for some of us was useful. But for others that had already done that or weren't interested in doing that, it wasn't relevant really to being peer support worker. I think so. That was one of the things. I was lucky enough that when the North Middlesex Hospital emergency department's psychiatric liaison team decided they wanted to bring in peers as well, and they got some really good funding and they offered the peers a level 4 peer support worker qualification. Yeah. And that was with Open University, Nottingham University, Nottingham Mental Health Foundation Trust or Nottingham Foundation Trust. And it was, I think it was it 8 over a period of 8 weeks or something? I can't remember exactly. But as I'd sat on the interview panel to employ the new peers for the North Middlesex, the lead consultant offered me a place on the training. So I did the training, but that was 2 years after I'd already started.
Which is kind of a common occurrence. So part of the reason is because I know there will be people who are listening to us. Maybe they have just started, or maybe they are previous service users, or they know someone who access to peer support and they are interested in this. First of all, would you agree with me? I find that almost all of the people who do either peer support or lived experience work actually have been doing it in their lives. Not as a profession, but we all call it not a job but a vocation.
Yes, definitely.
And it really takes time. There's no short explanation. Every time I go back to Turkey, there's a considerable amount of time I spend explaining what I do to my family and friends, because also the system is not similar in Turkey as well. So it takes a while. But usually at the moment, what I say is definitely check out recovery colleges. Most of mental health trusts have a recovery college. And in our trust, there are courses called What is Peer Working? The first course, you take it, and if you like it, then you move on to steps into peer working, which is a very good way to familiarize. It's not going to make you necessarily able to do the work as such, but think about the work, have a good understanding of it. And then if you are able to, because I know not everybody is able to do it, try it out as a voluntary role. Because regardless of however much training we get, I don't think anything really can describe it, what it's like.
Yeah.
Use your lived experience until you are in the first session with a complete stranger, and then you start to recognize your talents, and then you start to recognize what you learned, but also what you already had.
Yeah.
Basically been using.
I mean, what I did as well, whilst I was still, before I started the work, and it was with Haringey adult learners, was I did a communication skills course, which was like 6 weeks. I think I did active listening, which was, I think, another, was that 6 weeks or more? I can't remember. But anyway, I did those 2 short courses. And then from that, I did level 2 counselling skills. And that, I think, held me in good stead for when I started, because I had kind of those which are really good. They're useful life skills to have anyway. So I think that really helped me. I think, like you said, for us, it's a vocation. I think we're naturally, not all of us, obviously, but for those of us that have got into this, it's because we've been, we really care about what we've done or what we've been through. How difficult it could have been to navigate the system, not having anyone that could have kind of shown us the way. So therefore we're able to do that. So I think that kind of comes naturally as well. I think there's this misunderstanding as well that we would need to, it's about sharing our experiences, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to sit down with someone and tell them all about give them details about my mental illness and some of the things that I, like the intrusive thoughts or it doesn't need to be like that. And initially, maybe I think some of us thought it did, or it's, well, how can I support someone if I've not got schizophrenia? How can I support someone who has schizophrenia, or the other way around? And I think we're not supporting. It's not about supporting with the same illness, though. Obviously, some of the symptoms and how you manage the symptoms could be helpful. But I think in a general way, it's about sharing what we've done that has helped us and how we've.
That's a great point you touched on. I have a colleague and a dear friend as well. We always talk about this. We have slightly different views on this, and I would love to know your take on it. I keep saying lived experience and peer support work, and there might be some listeners, why are you keeping that long thing? Why can't you make it shorter? Because it's not necessarily the same thing. And her take on it was, her approach to it is, it's peer support when you are coming from a similar background in terms of a diagnosis, and it's more lived experience work if you're doing it strategically, first of all, maybe contributing to a service design but maybe not doing client work, or maybe you're working on similar symptoms but very different diagnosis. And also, let me caveat this, there is no kind of bang on descriptions that everybody agrees in this line of work, and that's why I'm exploring with Claire, and I want to hear how you feel about that. What do you think about that?
I think I agree with you. There is I mean, I don't mind the lived experience thing, but I also believe sometimes it needs to be specific, because everyone's got lived experience of something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in a sense it is kind of the difference for me at work anyway, the way I see it, the difference between a peer support worker and a lived experience practitioner is that the peer support worker, everybody knows that part of your role is about using and sharing your experiences and what you've been through and what you found helpful. Whereas with a lived experience practitioner, it might be slightly different, as in there might be, we've got staff that have lived experience. I mean, I did a session on generalized anxiety, and it's a session where it talks a little bit about anxiety and what it is and what it does to the body. And then I do like a relaxation exercise afterwards. And one of the members of staff, who's not peer support, but is here as a recovery worker, joined the session. So they have anxiety, but they don't share that or use that in their job role. They've got lived experience of anxiety. I mean, anxiety, everyone has anxiety, but as in anxiety preventing them from doing things, but they don't talk about it or use that experience in their role, whereas I would.
I hear you, but lived experience workers also share their lived experience.
They do if they've got lived experience in their title, maybe. I think the difference between a lived experience worker and a peer support worker is the level at which they're working, as in maybe the banding that they're at. Or I don't know. Because the lived experience workers I know are more band 7, or they've been psychologists, or they're personality disorder. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
The people I know are doing more strategic roles, as in designing training or services, but not have a caseload. That's been my observation.
Okay. That's maybe the difference then. So is that what you mean? So someone with lived experience might actually be behind the scenes working at a band, working on strategy or policies or whatever, but they're not actually using their experience face to face.
On a one-to-one,
Right, okay. Yeah,
and another thing I want people to have an understanding of, but also this is my personal curiosity as well, because we work in very isolated ways, and actually this podcast gave me so much more about my colleagues and the people I met, about their journeys, that I wouldn't know because we come across in meetings rather than running into each other over coffee. What it is like doing peer support in a crisis service, because I come from community mental health team background. So it's not very fast paced. Of course, there's a huge workload, but we work by appointment. We have relatively longer time at our hands. People consent and know what this is before coming into working with me or my colleagues. Whereas I'm imagine it should be quite different in a crisis service. What it is like?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I worked in a community team for like 3-4 years. I was in a community team, south locality team, and I had a caseload, and I did a lot of, I suppose there was kind of key working, did a lot of like groups or courses, and a lot of kind of community, kind of connecting people in the community as well. So that was very different. I found it really, it's an odd one, because I found it really, really stressful being in the community, as in working, because you've got your caseload, you've got to see a certain amount of people, you've got to have a certain amount of contacts in a day, you've got to make sure you've written up all your notes. I don't know. And then you've got your caseload, but then it's like others, or the manager would come and go, oh, we've got this one, we haven't allocated them a care coordinator yet, but they could really do with a bit of support. Or we've got this woman who doesn't really interact with their care coordinator, but they're about to lose all their benefits. We need to get them to the DWP office so that they can carry on with the deputyship, because it was someone that didn't believe they were on benefits. It's like, I earn my money, I'm a writer and an artist. They weren't, but that was their belief. So it's really hard to get them. So I had to do that piece of work with them to get them and convince them to come to the DWP and get the papers signed and everything. So I just found it was enjoyable, very different. I enjoyed the whole kind of co-facilitating. I created and co-created a lot of groups as well. And the walking group that I started was just really, really, it's still running now, so that's really good. And then when I came here, where I am now, which is like the crisis prevention house, so it's not as acute as someone in kind of like maybe the emergency department who's kind of cut their wrists open or anything like that, but they are in a mental health crisis. They might be feeling suicidal, they might be thinking about it more. They're not doing anything, they're not actively suicidal, but they are thinking about it a lot, and they're a bit frightened, and they might feel that they can't keep themselves safe at home, so they come to us. I find it a lot less stressful, I think, because I can think on my feet, and I'm quite good at doing that, and I just kind of take things as they come along. I'm not working to deadlines, which stress me out.
Right. That's very interesting.
And it suits me, and I can kind of manage my day the way I need to. Sometimes I need to step in, like this morning we were short staffed, so I've had to step in and do like the early shift, whereas normally I do 9 to 5. So there's always staff here, and then there's me as the peer doing the activities. I do other stuff as well, and I leave because of my I suppose being a band 5, you're expected to do a little bit more. But yeah, I just find it, I thrive on it. It's an odd one, I guess.
Right.
But yeah.
So let me check if I got that right. So people come into your service, and do they stay with you?
Yes, so they stay with us. So we're a 24-hour service. The idea is they can come and stay with us for up to 2 weeks or 14 days. They come. The idea is that we are a step up, what they would call a step up from the community. So this basically means anyone that is at home in the community, they might have a community team, so they might have a care coordinator, they might have a support worker, they might be involved in the drug and alcohol services, or it might be their very first time that they've ever kind of come into contact with mental health services. So it might be that they can't keep themselves, or they don't believe they could keep themselves safe at home, because the temptation to maybe then take an overdose or to cut themselves might be too great, and there's no one there to stop them, or there's no one there for them to talk to. But at the same time, they don't meet the criteria, or it wouldn't necessarily be beneficial for them to be in a hospital, which is very restrictive. So it's kind of like a middle ground. So
Yeah.
that's the ones that come from the community. We also are used as what they call step down, which means those patients that are in the hospital, they might not be ready to go home. So they might need a little bit of a bridge before they go home. It might be that their home needs a deep clean because they became unwell and these things happen, or they flood all sorts of stuff happen. People flood their houses, they get overrun with rubbish, hoarding, whatever, the door gets kicked in, or they've got no gas, the boiler's broken, so they can't go home. They can't go from hospital home, so they come to us, and then that will get fixed or sorted out before they can go home.
Yeah, yeah. When I was working in the community, I had many clients who found it very helpful having access to a crisis house and yeah, really turn things around. Have you got any suggestions, any guidance to people who are just starting doing peer support work or who are thinking about it? What would you
Okay.
like them to think about? What would your
I
advice?
think I would like them to think about, because I've seen it where people have thought, where they might have been in hospital, or they might have been with community services. They might have had a peer support worker, and they think, oh, that's great, I can do that. I think it's important that you think about your triggers and have a really good understanding of what your illness is and how you're able to manage it and keep yourself safe and well. Because if you don't, it can be very overwhelming. And it's important to think, I think as well, that you're coming into a working environment. So you're not doing a voluntary role. You're not a service user anymore, though you might be a service user somewhere else. But generally, the peers don't go into the services that they're in, though I'm sure they can, but generally. So and to remember that you are a member of staff. Unless you're doing something voluntary, you come in, you've got a job, you're being paid to do what you're doing. That in itself, for some people, if it's their first ever job, it can be difficult to realise that you need to get up at the same time every morning. There's policies you need to follow, procedures, and that can be quite overwhelming, I think, for some people, because it might be, I'm not feeling too well, I'm going to hide under the duvet today. And then they don't phone in work because they don't really think about it. And then they show up to work 3 days later and it's like, what's happened? And it's important to remember that it is a workplace. So if this is something that you've not done before, it might be worth kind of getting an understanding of what it means to be in a paid job. I would say don't overthink things too much, because that can make it even more stressful and kind of create more anxiety for yourself. Don't think you're doing it wrong or right, because there is no wrong or right way to do it. It's what works for you and the person that you're working with. And a big one, I think, for me, and when I first came in, I had a mentor who was one of the lead consultants on one of the acute wards. And he said to me, Claire, the NHS is very hierarchical. And when I started, I was a band 2, right? So he said it's very hierarchical. And as a band 2, so the band 2s and the band 3s, they're right at the bottom, right? He says, but remember, he says, you're in a multidisciplinary team. And the reason you're in a multidisciplinary team is because they believe that everyone has got something worth saying, that everyone's voice is just as valid as someone else's. So your voice is just as valid as a social worker or as a consultant. So don't be scared to speak up, which I think, personally, I found that really helpful. I found it really helpful, because I know it can be quite scary. Oh my God, but they're like a band 8 or a 7 or a 6, and it's like I'm only a band 3 or a 4, and I don't really, they've got to tell me what to do, and it's like I mean, there's the line manager that you've got to go to your line manager, and there's a process to follow. But that whole thing, if you're in a multidisciplinary team, you've got just as much right as anyone else to speak up and have your voice heard. So that was really useful for me.
Absolutely. And I would add that because we have a really strong protective side to us.
Yeah.
I also want people hearing this. I don't want them to think that, it's going to be only difficult work. And it's not like that. It's really rewarding.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It's really important to learn about your boundaries and knowing your signs, having a really good self-awareness. And that's why I think it's essential to have specific peer support training before doing the work, because those skills are taught in that training that you might not able to find
anywhere else.
any other like health and social care training.
Yeah,
I don't know.
exactly.
Maybe there is, but I think it's specific to lived experience workers, and the strains that work brings in, that training gives you, sets you up with really good skills.
I think it's important to remember as well that you've got more. It's not just you and your illness. You know, you would have had other. I mean, when I came into recovery and started working, how old am I now? I'm 57, so I was 49 or something. I've got all those. It's almost like you come in sometimes, and it's like, oh well, you're an ex-service, other members of staff, ex-service user, not really sure what you're doing there, and you get treated with like your illness or your recovery, and that was kind of it. And it's like, well, hold on a minute, I'm 49 years old. I've got a whole load of life that I've lived since, you know, I've been out working since I was a kid. Lived in a foreign country. I've learned a new language. And I've worked in many different kind of areas. So it's not just that. You bring
everything,
experience with you.
Absolutely. For instance, my experience of immigration and its relation to my mental health, its specific triggers helped me a lot. And also the work helped me a lot to recognize that as well. I found out more about myself while doing the work as well. It's definitely part of my recovery journey, doing the work itself.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, what were you doing before this work?
What was I doing before? Before I came here, I was working. I was actually, the last job I had before I kind of had the breakdown, well, kind of, I think that was, I was running a self-storage company.
I mean, I want to ask about stories, but they might not necessarily be relevant to the content of this podcast. I'm always curious.
Yeah, self-storage. I've done, I worked as an interpreter for a long while with the British community.
In Spain?
In Spain, yeah. Once I learnt the language. What else have I done? I've worked as a cleaner. I've worked as a waitress in a restaurant. I've run bars. What else have I done? Done admin. So I worked for as well, what they would call, I suppose it's like where you've got so like admin, where you've got private apartment blocks in Spain, and they're owned by, they would have like a community of owners, and there's certain laws and rules that they have to follow, and they'd have like an AGM and all this kind of stuff. So I was there, and I would have to then translate all the minutes from Spanish into English, and then be there, attend the AGMs or any meetings that were needed. If there were clients or owners, if there were English owners, then I would be there to be able to kind of translate for them or communicate with them, and just make sure any paperwork that went out, or any letters especially, went out in their language so that they could understand it.
Do you miss living in Spain?
I do. But at the same time, it was, and when I was there, I'd been there for nearly 20 years when I came back. So I'd been there a long chunk of my life. And I never imagined myself back in London, but it worked out the way it had to work out. So, you know.
Thank you for sharing all of that. So let's come to a good example. What's a great day looks like for you? It could be an actual day, or you can describe the feeling.
And a good day for me, it depends. It can be something really, really simple. As for example, the other day, last week, I think it was, or the week before last, it was nice and sunny. It was a Friday afternoon, and we went over to our local park, and I got a bag of porridge oats. And we went, and the local park to where I work has got like 3 duck ponds or something. So I went there with a couple of and we don't call them at the crisis house, we don't call them patients or service users, they're guests. So we call them guests. So me and some of the guests went over there, and we fed the ducks, and we walked and we talked, and one of the women opened up a little bit to me about some stuff, you know, and it was like, and it was just a really, really beautiful kind of relaxed day. And it was one of them days that just kind of folded out into, it hadn't been planned. It wasn't planned. We were going to do something else, but then because the sun was shining, can we go to the park? It's like, yeah, okay, let's go. I think one of the best days I had, especially when I first started, was I went on a home visit with one of the nurses, and there was this young guy, and he had a diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder. He felt that the reason why his relationship had broken up was because of the medication he'd been put on. So as we know, a lot of the medication kind of can have an adverse effect on the way we feel. You know what I mean? It can numb a lot of the feelings. Terrified to talk to anyone about what was going on. So I was really like new to the job then, but it still really sticks in my mind. So I started talking to him. I shared some of my most scariest intrusive thoughts that I'd ever had, and like some of the beliefs that I had. And I remember like I looked out of his window and pointed at a tree, and I shared a thought with him. And because I'd shared that with him, he was then able to share some back with me. And so that kind of opened it up. And I think it was because there was no judgment there. And I think for a lot of people with OCD that have these intrusive thoughts that are really alien to them and go against everything they believe in or their core values, it can be quite scary because you think, is this me? And it's not. And I explained to him how prior to having talking therapy that gave me an understanding of how the OCD brain works and catching on to the thoughts and all that. But afterwards he would like to be put down to have talking therapy. So that for me was like brilliant, you know what I mean? It was great because he was so adamant he wasn't going to talk or share anything about anyone. And then he did, and he started, and that was the only contact I had with him. I was on the Enfield Therapists team chatting, and his name came up. He'd been referred to a specialist unit for people with OCD. So that for me was like a great day, and it gave me a lot of hope. I think that I was in the right place and doing the right job.
Thank you for sharing that. We have a theme that you picked to talk about. Is that the theme?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna stick with that theme.
So it's about addiction.
It is about addiction, yeah.
So let's start with why you want to pick that and what does it mean to you? What addiction means to you?
Okay, so I picked addiction because it within my recovery, because it was because I was an addict. I am an alcoholic in recovery. I am an addict in recovery, if you like. But it was also the fact that by getting my mental health sorted out, that enabled me to also then sort out my drinking and drug taking. So the drugs I put down many, many years ago, but it was still a lot of drink for me that was involved, if you like, yeah. But it was, so I think because I didn't, like I'd said at the beginning, I didn't learn, I didn't get the support or the help that I needed. So I just found my own way of coping with it, which was that I found that basically it just kept things at bay and kept things manageable for a very long time until they became unmanageable and I couldn't manage the drinking and I couldn't manage my mental health. It's something that I'm able to share and use as a peer with the guests or in the community team with the service users that I worked with when that was a problem for them. So, I mean, prime example, there was this woman and she was attending one of the courses that I was co-facilitating. We got chatting about something and it came up about the whole thing with alcohol. That was what she was really struggling with. We connected through a relationship, and both our fathers had the same name, and we kind of connected through that. And I shared with her about going to AA, which is Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and said to her, I'll find one that is on during my working time so I can take you to a meeting. I couldn't do that because it wasn't available, or I think I went off, was that just before COVID? I can't remember anyway. But she had a friend, because I'd opened that up to her. She was like, oh, I've got a friend who does that. Maybe I can ask them. And she's now like six years in recovery from alcohol just by me being able to share that experience with her. So she was then able to start her own journey, and it's independent and I don't see her. So, and the whole peer, the thing around the fellow, what they call like 12-step fellowship, so that's like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, it's one, they say one alcoholic helping another alcoholic. So it's just one person helping another person. And it's you using your shared experience of what you've done to get yourself well.
And it's another form of peer support, isn't it?
It is, exactly. It is peer support. It's mutual.
Roots come from there.
Definitely, which is why I think it fitted in nicely with being like talking about the peer support and stuff.
Yeah. But also, like when I said I'll just repeat that. So what addiction means to you? Is it addiction when you can't manage it? Is it addiction only if it's alcohol and drugs? Because I feel like I have an addictive personality. I don't have a substance addiction,
Right.
but I do.
It can
So
come out
I'm
shopping,
mindful.
food.
Exactly. So yeah.
I mean, I always say that when I was a child and I read books, right? And I learned to read really young. I've got an older brother, so he's like 3 years older than me. So as he learned to read at school, he taught me to read. So I learned to read really young, and escaping into books was a way for me to escape from whatever was going on in my head in life that I couldn't cope with. But I couldn't, once I started reading a book, I couldn't stop until I finished it. Yeah.
I experienced the exact same thing, so it
So when I
definitely
started
resonates with me.
drinking, it was the same. I start to drink and
Yeah.
I wouldn't stop until I kind of passed out or couldn't drink anymore.
Yeah.
You know, and the same with drugs. And for me, the addiction, I think, is, I mean, there's an argument. Some people say you're born an addict. Yeah. And others are like, it's nurture or it's nature. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It can be. I think, I'm not sure where I sit on that, to be quite honest, whether or not I was born the way I was born. But for me, I think being an addict is when you're using something and you can't stop using it to change the way you feel. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really fun anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that for me. So there's many different types. Some people, I mean, there were substances that I was physically addicted to, like heroin, because that is physically addicts you, you know. And I spent about 6 or 7 years addicted to heroin, but I got off of it in my 20s. That was in my 20s. But there's others, but I was never physically addicted to alcohol. I was never physically addicted to anything else. Tobacco, nicotine, physically addicted to that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, my definition for me is once I start something, if I can't stop, then I know it's causing me a problem and it's making me feel shit. Sorry, but it's making me feel bad about
It's all
myself.
right. Yeah. 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 Well, thank you for that. Is there anything else you would like to share on addiction?
Anything else? I would say that there is, if you are struggling, there is support out there. Make sure you reach out. And I don't know, but an addiction it can be gambling as well. Gambling's a really, really bad one for some
Yeah.
people. I mean, I've never really been a gambler, but it can.
And I think when I say I have an addictive personality, for instance, sometimes it's mobile games for me.
Yes,
It's
it can.
not gambling, but I did spend at some point quite a lot of money on it. It was like thousands of pounds, but it was quite a lot for the income I had at the time.
Yeah.
Or like, as you said, when I was little, I was reading books, but my eyes would hurt, my back would hurt.
Yeah.
And I don't have an OCD diagnosis, but I would do that, you know, so that's very familiar. So what also worked with me, maybe you are not like very addicted to something, like it might not be a health issue at this point, but you might want to work on it. Part of it is also embracing that as a part of you, especially if you have the tendency that can come out. Like I remember coloring for 8 hours in a row and my back would hurt. Um, Obviously it's not the same thing as the mainstream addictions we know, but also it's important to recognize the reasons.
Exactly.
And when we are able to, because sometimes we are able to stop. So I would start from, you know, embracing when was the time I was able to stop and what worked me for me, worked for me back then, and what doesn't work for me when I can't, could be quite
I think,
helpful.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I recognize it. I mean, at the moment, for me, it's sugar, you know, and I'm eating, and some days I will eat so much sugar or sugary substance foods that I don't eat real food. Yeah. And I know that is an issue, but I'm also aware sometimes that I know that I'm just doing this and I'm doing it because I'm just trying to fix my feelings. And I know that's what it is. And I think once you know and you become aware, that's then when you can maybe start to do something about it. But it's not necessarily easy because I say to myself, I'm not going to buy any chocolate today, or I'm not going to buy any sweets today. Then I go in the shop to get some milk and I come out with a big box of Maltesers and a bag of Sour Patch Kids. And then I eat them all, you know? So it's...
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, sugary stuff definitely.
It is, and it's not good for us either.
In all of these years, I think coffee is the most difficult one for me. It's constant management with coffee with me.
Coffee. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
a real coffee addict as well. I love my coffee. Yeah.
yeah. So thank you for today, Claire.
Thank you for asking me, Neil. It's been okay.
It's been a pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on. And thank you to our listeners. Until the next one, stay well and stay connected. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Community of Excellence podcast. We hope these conversations help break stigma, build understanding, and remind you that healing is possible, especially when we come together. If you have been affected by anything in this episode, please know you're not alone. Support is available. You can speak to your GP or a mental health professional. For urgent mental health support in North London, contact the crisis line on 0800 151 0023. You can also call Samaritans anytime on 116 123. For free confidential support, you can text SHOUT to 85258. You can also call Calm Helpline on 0800 585858. Until next time, keep connecting and keep believing in the power of lived experience. This is more than a conversation, it's a movement.